Okay, welcome friends. My name is Justin, and I'm going to take you through a presentation on some of the more scientific case studies, some of the big research studies, and other accounts of testimonials, people who've had results working through mind-body medicine. I put the title Mind, Body, Soul because it's not just the mind, body, but there is a deeper aspect to it. And that's something that comes forward more through working with this kind of medicine. I put this study together because I found it really hard to try and track down certain studies, things that would point me in a direction to validate some of the questions that I had in my mind regarding the validity of these practices. Before going through my own healing journey with chronic back pain and chronic symptoms of all kind, I was very wrapped up in what could be proven by science. And there was a lot of reasons for this. I mean, I'm sure you can probably relate, is that nobody wants to get taken advantage of. You know, there are such things as snake oil salesmen and that kind of thing. People who can sometimes take advantage of other people in a rough situation. Unfortunately, these kinds of things exist. But also, there are things that are happening and research that is happening and studies that have happened even way before the time of now, which is 2020. And they really validate a lot of this research and these practices that are being done to heal the conditions that have gone to epidemic proportions in our society. So I created this study because back then I needed something like this. And I thought it would be great to have a resource for people to quiet that little voice that's so doubting, that says, "Oh, this is woo-woo stuff. This can't be real. You know, how can you? Where's some of the? I need some tangible proof. I need some scientific medicine proof that this is real." Here it is. So let's get started. So what are we going to explore? We're going to explore published studies, information through PubMed and other places. We're going to look at some of the research and studies that have been done that connect the mind and the body, as well as how those connections correlate to healing chronic pain and a vast amount of symptoms in modern mind-body medicine practices. So the stuff that we're looking at, the conditions that we're looking at, I mean, the list is really, really long, but we're talking about back pain. And the back pain can come from herniated discs, scoliosis, bad posture, injuries that, didn't quite heal properly, muscle spasms, ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune condition that my brother had, and that had I got the test, probably would have been diagnosed with as well. Repetitive stress injuries, tennis elbow, carpal tunnel, fibromyalgia, migraines, tinnitus, body pains of all kinds. So we're looking at chronic pain and symptoms. That name is the easiest one to just umbrella so many things, because it's a chronic symptom or chronic pain that just doesn't go away. It's lasted for months or more, years, and allergies, things like that. These are mind-body syndromes. We're talking about disease in the body. Almost everything you can name has had people heal from them, and through many different ways. What we're going to explore is the way, looking at it through the research done showing how connected the mind and the body are, and how that applies to these things. There's other kinds of healing, spontaneous remissions, miracle healings. There's so many of them documented. Back in the day before the internet, we would never hear about these things, maybe through word of mouth or through ancient scriptures, through stuff like that. It was something that was passed along. Out here in Hawaii, we call it the coconut wireless. It was passed through the coconut wireless, but now the internet is changing all this. A lot of this stuff is coming up. We can see it. We can hear people's testimonials. And remember, that's just people who decided they wanted to share. There's so many more people who have healed, and they just don't feel like they want to be on video, or they feel like they don't want to share. They're busy living their lives again, and they just haven't got around to sharing it online, or they've told their friends, but they haven't put it out there for everybody. So we're not going to be talking about healing these diseases in the body through conventional medicine. So I'm talking like mainstream Western medicine, through pharmaceuticals, through surgeries, through prolonged, strict diets, that kind of thing. We're talking about healing from the inside out. We're talking about healing in a modality that provides long-lasting results. It's a deeper form of healing. Not to say that the modern modalities are all bad. Some of them are amazing. We've done some insanely good things with technology. But for the purpose of this study, we're looking at healing chronic symptoms and the research and studies that have been done on those things from healing in a mind-body fashion. Understanding the mind-body. Experiencing the soul. So it's not that this stuff doesn't exist and it's hard to find. It's out there. It's just that a lot of it is not common knowledge. I remember when I was going through my chronic pain journey, I knew none of this, because at the beginning I didn't need to know any of it. Unless you're somebody who is interested in that kind of thing, or has studied medicine, or maybe you come from a family that is into meditation and certain practices, you wouldn't really, or you had another family member who was ill and finally found out about this stuff, you wouldn't ever really know, because you wouldn't really need to know. It's only if you, in my case, I was put in a position where I was looking for something to get my life back and to understand what the hell was going on. So these studies are out there. This information is out there, and even more now with the internet, you just have to look. The way I grew up, same thing. I was like most of us grew up. I was really not even into, it was just by default. It was just the mainstream medical practices was all that I knew. And this is how a lot of our society works in the West, because the practices are so tied into a system, and the system is based on things like insurance, incentives, and all kinds of employment and economics. It's not that it's like a big evil system. It's just that's where the momentum is. That's where the money is. That's where these pharmaceutical companies, that's how they kind of like integrate into society, and that's where the public opinion comes from. So if you didn't have to look for something else, and you never had health problems or whatever, you never felt needed or called to find something different, you wouldn't really look for anything else, because that what's available is what's out there in the mainstream medical system. We're going to explore, just quickly go over some people who have had testimonials. I've gathered some just to look over quickly, just to show that it is out there. There's so many people healing, even on an exponential scale. It's happening every single day. We have a tendency in our culture to be very overcritical and analytical about things, because we in the West, we really value scientific validification. So it's like if it hasn't been studied and there's not a Harvard article on it, or there's not a PubMed article on it, or somebody who we look up to as a medical professional hasn't talked about it, we don't even give it the space sometimes to even begin to think that it's believable. Now, again, like I said, this can be good. I mean, nobody wants to be duped. Nobody wants to feel like, oh, you got me with this crap, like I had hope, and you're just selling snake oil. Unfortunately, people who are dealing with chronic pain and symptoms, that kind of skepticism can be really detrimental, because a lot of this stuff is out there, and you just have to open your mind a little bit, and you won't even look there if your mind's not open. So some people get inspired to, some people get desperate to. In this, I want to show you that it's out there. You can heal. You can transform suffering. You just have to maybe look in a different place. So the intention is just to show that it's out there. I've recovered. My brother's recovered. So many people who are recovering from things with a renewed sense of life and purpose from, however long ago, even just a few years ago, 5-10 years ago, those kind of things where people were like, oh, that's just something you have for life. And that's not the case. So I'm going to point you into some studies that have been done. Why is this not common knowledge? Why don't most people know about this? I find it so surprising when I talk to people and how little people know about these things, how little public opinion has changed on these things. Some of the studies are relatively new. Some of the studies are coming out now. Some of the studies is, like I said, there just hasn't been the motivation to look, but they're there. Whole economies are based on some of the older forms of treatment. There's a lot of clashing interests. Some people's livelihoods are at stake. Think about the gigantic proportion of money that the pharmaceutical industry, that our medical industry has and is spending, and there's a clash of interests. If that goes away, things will have to get restructured. But also, it's a huge load of debt taken off the taxpayer. I know for sure that I had a lot of biases based on opening my mind to different forms of healing, because I didn't think that it was possible. It sounded crazy in my mind that you could heal physical pain from understanding emotions, from understanding the mind. That's where the mind-body split was really, really strong in me. It's hard sometimes for people to take on new information. Some people just aren't into it. People are busy. Like I said, if you never were put in a position where you really, really wanted to heal and change your life, you wouldn't even come across this stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of things that have to come together to actually entertain another option. The mainstream rhetoric is strong. Everything from commercials, the movies, to just the subtle things like the way other people talk about back pain and chronic pain and fibromyalgia and symptoms and stuff like that. It's even if you just go to the park and you're talking to somebody about, oh yeah, I've had this symptom for a while, like they'll tell you all this stuff that they know for sure, that they might have heard on oh, you should try this drug, or yeah, surgery was the only way that I could heal. And so I mean, the rhetoric gets passed down. It's only by chance or by luck you might come across somebody who can tell you what I'm going to tell you, and in that case you have to have an open mind to hear it, or you'll just turn it away. Some of the information, it just doesn't make sense if you don't know what to look for. Studies can be complicated, and it can be kind of overwhelming. My doctor, when I was growing up, he was the last person to ever talk to about a mind-body issue. He actually told my brother that he could expect to have his autoimmune condition for the rest of his life, and that he was probably going to end up in a wheelchair. My brother went back to him last year, completely healthy, and the guy was just blown away. So depending on where the doctor comes from and his background, that's going to determine a lot with the things that he is open to, and thus that's going to determine what you hear. So let's explore a little. I always like to think of scientific studies as and case info and what we're going to look at as things that just help me to understand things a little more, not to define my reality. If you wait for a study to come out before you can make a change, you're limiting yourself. We have the ability to take information and use it to help us create an assessment of things around us, but not to define exactly what it is. Things are changing all the time. This was a study that it really made an impact on me because it's just so clear. So basically, they performed an MRI on 67 individuals who had never had low back pain. So they never had sciatica, they never had spasms. They're totally fine. These people are happy, healthy, no pain. And then they took a look at those scans. About 1/3 of the subjects were found to have a substantial abnormality. So we're talking, a herniated disc, disc bulging, spinal stenosis, at all different levels of their spine. These people were shown to have what would normally be classified as abnormalities in the spine that would indicate pain, sometimes severe pain. But these people had no back pain. So think about that for a second. A lot of this kind of thing has been validated by doctors everywhere now. Dr. Schubner, he makes the analogy that abnormalities on the MRI, so we're talking discs bulging, we're talking certain nerves out of place, we're talking things that they're not normal in the sense of what would the perfect back look like, but he likens them to gray hair. It's a normal part of living. It's a normal part of aging. It's a normal part of being active and playing sports. Things get bumped around a bit. You might have a disc here, but it doesn't mean that that's what's causing your pain if you feel pain. Unfortunately, medical professionals have been trained to attribute the physical pain to the sense of physical pain to an abnormality no matter what. I shouldn't say no matter what, but if someone comes in, if you come in with back pain and they find a herniated disc, they're going to attribute the pain to that. Even though this study and even other studies have proven that that's not the case. Just because there's an abnormality doesn't mean that causes pain. If you've ever been into an MRI, you'll know that it's a pretty wild experience. It's pretty influential. It's all these loud noises and this really sophisticated looking equipment around. And then if you get a diagnosis that you have these herniated discs, it's like, whoa, with all that crazy equipment around and all those really professional looking people and all that advanced technology, that can really create an impression on people. It's like, it must be true. Whoa, I really got something wrong if this thing says that my stuff's out of place. It can really create something that's hard to change in the mind. But we're seeing now that that's not the case. Most doctors won't ask you about what's going on in your life if you have any stresses or any emotional problems. They will just look at the MRI. We're getting the picture of the body, but not attached to the mind, not attached to the emotions. We're just getting a picture of the body. So you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. Now, this study was done on males with PTSD. So it basically found out that in these males, they had the same sensitivity points and the same physical experience that you would attribute to fibromyalgia. So chronic pain in numerous parts of the body. PTSD is normally thought of as predominantly a psychological disorder. You know, it's given to people a lot of times who come back from war or survive really intense natural disasters or have undergone really hard childhoods of abuse. We tend to think of that as more of a psychological problem. And yet this study is showing that PTSD can actually be felt in the body. A lot of the criteria for in rheumatology is coincidentally the same things apply to PTSD. So if somebody came in and they never told the evaluator that they had PTSD, they were just complaining of the pain in the body, they would say, oh, you have fibromyalgia. But if somebody has been diagnosed with PTSD, then it's like, oh, we're going to send you to a psychologist. But it's a little more holistic than that. So if we look at those two things separate, we really miss a chance for a more effective way to heal. So trauma does affect the mental aspect, but also, as we're seeing, the physical as well, also the experience of pain. Somatization, that is a term that it means when your psychological symptoms get transferred into the body. I mean, it's a fancy word, but that kind of shit happens all the time. The body expresses things that are happening in the mind. This study is really, really interesting. And if you have ever read any of Dr. John Sarno's books, you'll know that one of the main ways to heal TMS, which is tension binaural syndrome, chronic pain, just another way to say chronic pain. One of the main ways to treat that is expressive writing. So this study was done by Mr. Pennebaker, who it was kind of just a haphazard study. He basically got his students to write about, on their own in the class, to write about some traumatic things that happened or how they're feeling. You know, things that they kind of keep inside and don't really share with anyone. Repressed pain. So things that, hidden pain, hidden psychological pain. The results were pretty wild. The students found that as they wrote down these things and as they wrote expressively about the things that were happening inside and even had happened in the past, things that they were struggling with at the moment, they started to feel better. Once they got that shit off their chest and expressed it, they started to feel better. There was less trips to the doctors. There were people who had conditions that had the symptoms went way down. Now this study was so big that it changed things, and it's just been performed again and again and again. in other studies they've done the same thing, but then they've had researchers monitor blood pressure, heart rate, muscle tension, hand temperature, and it showed that the people who were allowing themselves to feel their emotions and write with them had significant changes in the physiology, both right away and in the long term, up to 6 weeks after. Right? It's crazy. Writing expressively, getting what's on your chest, getting what's been mulling around your mind and feeling it and writing it down changes your physiology, changes the need to have to go to the doctor. The physical effects are felt. So there may be a price to pay for repressing pain, for keeping those things secret, for carrying them for so long. It's not like you have to tell everybody, but even just writing them down and burning the piece of paper helps. So Sarno recommends that journaling, 30 minutes a day, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night. And not as a mental loop, but as expressive writing. If you just think about that stuff, it just creates a circle, and it actually feels worse. So gotta feel it to heal it. And this part comes up. It's going to come up more in this talk. But the people who reported having traumatic sexual experiences had double the hospital visits as any other group. So that that's a pretty traumatic thing to experience, and those people who had experienced that were shown to have worse health, physical health. Now, this study went even further. One of the aspects that they saw was that wound healing improved. So people who were writing about internal emotions and conflicts and what they were feeling actually healed faster. That's magic. As we clean ourselves from some of the feelings that just we forget they're even circulating in our bodies, we allow the body to heal faster. So immune system responses were better. Now you can go to the links on any of these studies and read all the details for yourself. I'm giving you the kind of like the overall, but it really, this study has been done so many times in a lot of different ways. And it even says there, it's important to write expressively and really be with what's happening, not just talking about it in a narrative sense, like, and then this happened, and then I had that, and then they did this to me, but feeling it from the inside out. So that's really key in this. So now we're going to look at some of the studies done by and influenced by this really amazing doctor, Candace Pert. She wrote a book called The Molecules of Emotion and really pioneered the field of psychoneuroimmunology. That's a fancy, very fancy word. That's mind, body, mind, nervous system immunology. Basically, what she had found is that the brain, the glands, immune system, they all have the same molecules and they communicate through these molecules. The mind and the body are constantly communicating. And there's receptors all throughout the body, not just the brain, but all throughout the body that are there to communicate emotions. So, in some of the ways that we have been taught to be and perceive the world, and we think of our emotions as just living in our brains, living in our minds. If you ask someone, oh, are you angry? Yeah, I'm real pissed off. Okay, well, yeah, because this person did that, and and I'm angry with this, and they'll go into a whole story about anger. How often do we realize that anger is a feeling in the body as well as an energy in the mind? Next time you feel angry, next time you feel sad or you're laughing, pay attention to what's happening in your body. When you laugh, those receptors in your stomach, the gut, there's receptors for joy, for laughter. Why do you think your belly does these convulsions when you really have a deep belly laugh? Or when your face goes red when you're really angry, you might get a headache. Or when the mucus and the phlegm and all kinds of nasty stuff come up when you're crying. Emotions have a really bodily feel to them, and some would say they're even more in the body. The mind is really one aspect of emotions, and Candace Pert has documented all this with these the findings of these nodes that have the same receptors that the limbic system in the brain have. So the emotional center in the brain, the limbic system, and these kinds of same molecules that are all throughout the body, not just in the brain. It's pretty wild. And it says here, I've come to believe that virtually all illness, if not psychosomatic in foundation, has a definite psychosomatic component. The molecules of emotion run every system in our body, creating a body-mind's intelligence that is wise enough to seek wellness without a great deal of high-tech medical intervention. Our bodies are made to heal. Sometimes shit gets in there that makes that harder. As we release, as we express the forms of emotion that can clog things up, we permit ourselves to heal more. She says some really amazing things in the stuff that she's published. And she came from a background that was not this body-mind holistic view of things. She came from a background, she worked for pharmaceutical companies studying the really nitty-gritty physical components of how drugs work in the brain. And from what she found out, she came to these conclusions. It's really simple. Just from the exercise that I said before, where you really start to feel emotions in the body, as you pay attention, that becomes even more pronounced. So this is a study that you may have heard of, maybe not. I never heard of it before. So this study basically showed that early childhood adverse experiences caused all kinds of things to be more prevalent in adulthood. So we're talking physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, different kinds of neglect, household dysfunction, parental divorce, dealing with a parent who's got mental illness, a parent who's in jail, homelessness. I think, no matter how perfect any family is, everybody has experienced some adversity in childhood. And basically this study had shown that there's a certain threshold where once somebody as a child experiences a certain amount of things, the percentage that they will experience health problems, substance abuse problems, relationship problems, physical and mental problems in their adulthood, it grows exponentially. The pain that we keep from childhood and that is never healed shows up in adulthood, and it shows up in ways that we don't even recognize sometimes. It can show up as rheumatoid arthritis. It can show up as smoking addiction. It can show up as alcoholism. It can show up as fibromyalgia. It can show up as all kinds of things, and we don't recognize the way that it shows up in, because we don't put them together. You go see a rheumatologist for rheumatoid arthritis because we're not making the connections between the body and the mind, between how mental traumas or childhood traumas can somatize into the body as seeming like they come from a physical thing. And how I pointed out before, how our medical system isn't designed for that. Yeah, you go to an MRI and they show you that you have some abnormalities in the spine, and that's where the pain's coming from. But the doctor never asks if you're angry. And maybe some of that anger comes from some unresolved trauma in childhood. Or maybe it just comes from your job. There's all kinds of things. So, that study wasn't taken from like some inner city rough neighborhood. That study was from groups that people that worked for the Kaiser Permanente company. So it's just a study that gives an overall impression. And, if you take that out into a wider view of the world, you can kind of see the trend here. Some of the people who struggle with health problems the most come from the most poverty, or maybe from the homes that, even if they were really wealthy, homes that never really paid attention to the kids. So it affects everybody. So you can find the questionnaire there, and they have the criteria for that, and just use it to see, Like I said, it doesn't define your reality, but you can get a trend of what's going on. You might stop looking at the MRI so much and realize that there's more to that story. There's more to the experience of physical pain than a picture. So that can seem a little heavy. But like I said before, most of us have traumas. Most of us have adverse experiences. And there's also the resilience. And resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulty and toughness. It's our toughness. It's our elasticity. And there's all kinds of things that help with that growing up. Maybe you moved around a lot, but maybe there was a parent who was really, really solid and grounded, and moving around all that much didn't really have an effect on you because you had a resource. Some people just have a very big capacity for resilience just built internally. Like I've met people who come from just amazing, just detrimental poverty, and the parents are on drugs and all that, but they're just so solid, just such solid people, and they don't have any health problems and stuff. Like they have a really unique resilience about them. And other people are a lot more sensitive. Other people might have a trauma from something that it wouldn't even affect somebody else at all. And also the things that are around you, the resiliences can be tapped into from the resources that are around you. If there might have been something that was really hard to deal with, but there was also a really comforting part of your childhood as well. So it's not just such a clear cut of, oh, well, this many bad things happened, you're going to get sick. There's more going on than that, It's just like how when something difficult happens in our lives, we have resources to deal with them. We can talk to people, or we can find that peace within somehow. If we have a spiritual practice, that can really be helpful. Friends, all kinds of resources. So the good news from that little bit of heaviness is that we can heal. People can heal. You know? You might know someone, or you might be someone who has a really tough physical diagnosis. You know, like, I remember when I had back pain, I was like, I would do anything to just get my life back into a place where I could just enjoy it again and have fun and not be in pain all the time. So yeah, it's a bit heavy to realize, like, okay, some of this shit that I went through when I was a kid is painful, and a lot of things that people go through are painful, but you can heal it. You don't have to struggle with fibromyalgia for the rest of your life. You don't have to have all these dietary restrictions to where you can't eat 99% of the foods on a restaurant menu. You don't have to deal with a migraine for the rest of your life. You know, that kind of stuff is really tough to deal with. For sure, dealing with emotional trauma is not easy, but the feelings on the other side of having your life back, of actually healing those wounds, is worth it. I can tell you. A wound is a place where light can enter. You may feel better in your life than you ever have when you started to address some of the things that you may have been carrying around for a long, long time. So this study, it looks at how people with NA, which is a negative affectivity, I mean, you know, people who just tend to look in the world as like the glass is half empty. You could I mean, we've all been there in like a pessimistic mood, but looking at something, you could look at something so beautiful, and this happens all the time. You know, we're surrounded by beauty in nature all the time, and yet we can choose to focus on like the one little thing that pisses us off. And so people who have who express high NA, you know, are usually preoccupied with the negative connotations of things, the negative emotions, the resentment, the things that somebody did 10 years ago, the sadness, that all those things. And sometimes they can become such a part of somebody that they don't even know that's not them. They're just in that all the time. And so it's unconscious. And people who have this kind of tendency can they can do the same thing with the body, meaning any little sensation, their brain can interpret it as pain or something else to worry about. Oh, I got to see the doctor about that now. Or, oh, that feels really intense. And it's not like it's all in their mind, but it is, their mind is oversensitized. The experience of those little sensations in the body can be really oversensitized. So it's sensed as more painful and more disturbing than people not under negative affectivity. So is there such thing as psychological pain? I mean, what do you guys think? Have you ever felt something hurt so bad psychologically and emotionally that you were like, damn, I wish this was a physical pain, because I know how to deal with that. I could put some ice on it. I could take a rest. I could take some painkillers. Emotional pain is sensed many of the same ways and in the same areas as physical pain. You know, these studies are showing that the feeling of rejection, can light up the same areas as physical pain. It's the term pain is not so separate, and when you apply it to the physical experience and the emotional experience of it. That quote, there's nothing like a little physical pain to keep your mind off of your emotional problems. I remember literally I said one time I would prefer the physical pain over this emotional pain. Think about that. You know, more studies talking about the same thing. You know, one of the studies is up top shows that people who think about their physical pain in a different way can make it go away. Schubner has a book, I think, Think Away Your Pain. So practicing different things like meditation and starting to become aware of what you attach your pain to and changing your experience of pain can make it go away. Different kinds of therapies. So you can go to those links as well. The rejection, again, down there, it's an alarm that's tied to so many other things. Our feeling of being in community, and if we get rejected, our primitive brain goes wild, because that back when we were living more tribal, our community was connected to our survival. So rejection is can be a very deep form of pain. So think about that in your life. You know, some things that you may be attributing to physical pain, or you may not have wanted to really feel and process at the moment, how that may be coming up for you now in terms of something more of a physical symptom. So not only can emotional pain, psychological pain be felt in the same areas and in the same way as physical pain, but it actually can be reduced using the same methods as physical pain. So medicines that target physical pain have an effect on emotional pain, and many of them do. Many of the prescriptions that get handed out for a lot of chronic pain actually numb the emotional centers as well, so we feel better. You know, I put there that there's the big breakups that really make our heart wrenches or heart wrench, or losing someone. Like, some of those feelings are so strong, and the physical pain is almost easier to deal with. But if we want to heal, if we truly want to be free, work through it on an emotional level so that we don't have to work through it on a physical level. A wound is a place where light can enter. So here's a study that it showed that how psychological trauma correlates with unsuccessful lumbar surgery. Right? It's like those two things in most of our minds and in most of mainstream medicine, you wouldn't even put them together, but they've done a study that shows that, you know, people who have had psychological traumas were less likely to have a successful back surgery. The pain was still there. Why? Because the pain wasn't coming from the abnormality on the MRI. The experience of pain was coming from something else. You know, sometimes too, our bodies can be weak in a certain area from an injury or from many factors, and the emotional pain that we carry is more drawn to those areas. People say, oh, my back is acting up again. Well, if it was structural, if your back was out of place physically, you would just be messed up all the time. Why is it just messed up when you have problems with your wife? Or why is it only messed up when the bills start coming in? When the stress level hits a certain point? Because there's more going on there. And that's good news, because it means that you don't have to have your back act up. You can realize it's more tied to things like anger. So one of the biggest symbols of the mind-body connection is the skin. And really, you'll see, I've seen this a lot, where skin conditions can either flare up or go away as you work through mind-body healing. So as you meet with me, as you go through in the program, sometimes things can pop up and then go away. I remember my brother had psoriasis, and all these people that had ankylosing spondylitis would have some psoriasis, and then certain symptoms would go down, and then the psoriasis would pop up. And that was like a good sign, because it meant that things were getting turned up. Things that had been deep in the body were coming out, and that they were the program was working. And then eventually the skin condition just goes away. Sometimes people have skin conditions their whole lives. They treat the back pain with the mind-body methods, mind-body connection, and then their skin just gets good as well, because they were connected. There's been a lot of studies done that show things like low self-esteem and depression and social phobia are linked with acne and cystic acne and that kinds of thing, because the body and the mind are not separate. So IBS is a huge one. A lot of people have IBS. I had IBS before, and this study really, it's an abstract of a whole research article that they did, showing the connection between the brain and the gut brain. People who are in fear states for a long time, their fight or flight is aroused for a long time, and this can be super subtle. We don't think just because there's a tiger's not chasing us through the city that, oh, we're good. But you can be in a fear state from not having enough money, from not knowing where you're going to live, from going through a divorce, from the memory of being abused as a child, and that it can be something can activate that, and your nervous system will tell you, because you might start to deal with some IBS. The things that we say about those kinds of problems, like, oh, like shit yourself, or oh, I was scared shitless, or I was scared the poop out of me, or they're pretty accurate. It doesn't all have to do with these really complex chemical components. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. It's a language, but you also can heal just from understanding that, just from understanding, like, whoa, yeah, I'm pretty freaked out at the moment, and I haven't actually acknowledged that to myself, and I'm going to do things in my life that really help me feel safer. Body's talking. Body is talking all the time. Your body is not separate from you. So this was an interesting study that they took whiplash. It's something in the U.S. and Canada and North America that's really common, in fender benders and stuff. And they basically, it doesn't exist in some other places in the world. And probably a few reasons for that. There's not a whole system set up to take care of people who experience those fender benders and have prolonged neck pain. So there's no insurance. It's not accepted as something. So people are less inclined to follow that route. They kind of forget about what happened. They're less likely to get stuck on the idea that there's something wrong with their back or their neck. And the other is that they did also a study where they put people in a position where they experience something like a fender bender, but with no physical jarring trauma, but something that stimulated more of it on an emotional level. And the study showed that you can carry a pain like that because of a situation or a trauma like a fender bender, because of the emotions that it caused, the surprise, the defense, the way that the nervous system reacts in a very tense and startled manner, and starts to become feeling unsafe. There's that feeling of being hit in the back with another car or something. It takes you off guard. It's so reactionary, and your muscles all tense, and that can become a pattern, so that you're hyper vigilant. Your nervous system is on guard. It doesn't know when that's going to happen again, and when you're on guard like that, your muscles they contract, and you lose oxygen in your muscles, and that's one of the biggest causes, biggest experiences of physical pain. Dr. John Sarno showed that in people with fibromyalgia, mild oxygen deprivation in the muscles was very present. So when muscles are contracted, they have less oxygen. There's even a study that was done where they had whiplash in one country, but they didn't have it in the other country. And as certain kinds of media and influence came to the country that never had whiplash, that country started to develop cases of whiplash, because it was a communicable problem. It's like if you have something that you're experiencing and somebody else knows what that is, and they provide you with a name and a potential solution for it, and who knows, maybe even some insurance compensation, that will be something that you'll take on more easily, and it spreads through the community. It spreads through the country. These things exist all over the place. There's places in the world that they don't talk about certain chronic pain in the same way that places like the States or Canada does. We have certain systems and established medical systems that look at problems in the body a certain way. And if you were to take that to some places in Asia or some places in India, it's a different language. It's a whole different, they might not even fit into the categories that we're talking about. They might not even have a name for it. There might not even exist. Many different things that exist here don't exist there. So this brings us to the idea that has been perpetuated through most of our society. And that is this idea of mind-body dualism. So who we think we are, our mind, where all of our thoughts are, is not connected to our body. We don't feel ourselves in our body. We don't feel like we're part of our body. We feel like our body is a machine. And this "I think, therefore I am" has really been the basis of a lot of our culture, especially in terms of medicine. If there's a problem with the body, it's like we go to a mechanic to fix it. I don't know. You look at your body and say, I don't know, things just acting up again. It's stalling and sputtering and blowing a little smoke out, and I don't know. I've been going to the bathroom more than more than I have before, and it's not really solid anymore. Sorry, too much information. And my leg hurts, and I don't know. Can you tune me up a little bit? And that's awesome for traumatic injuries, for accidents and things like that, because you need that. You have to fix the mechanical side, and then the body heals itself. It just doesn't work for the things that have become an epidemic, like the symptoms and the stuff that I listed before. So where we are now, where all this information is coming to, and really a lot of the modern paradigm is starting to shift. Is it's not I think before I am, it's I think, I feel, I intuit, I sense, I perceive, I know, I hear, I taste, I touch, I am connected to, therefore I am. I mean, though you can keep going with that. It's not just the thinking, but part of you reside in your ability to sense. Your gut feelings and your emotions that we've seen are all throughout the body. Your consciousness is not just limited to the little thinking part of the brain. Mind-body medicine is based more on this. So in healing, you look at emotions and beliefs and senses and instincts and adaptations and traumas and family systems and environment, and it's a holistic way of looking at yourself. And it's very freeing, because you realize you're not what you think you are. There's more to you. And I mean, most of the research is all pointing to this now. It's just that we're catching up. And people who are facing medical conditions and chronic pain and just a shitty way of living and are ready to heal, they're people who are really putting all this stuff into practice and have been saying things like this forever. This is how you heal. This is how you become. This is how you really tap into being more fully human. So the old ways they're dying. Things are getting replaced by something new, and that's good news. It's good news for all of us. So there's more than just the thinking. Your body is part of what you are and is always speaking. So you learn to listen the language of the body. You learn to listen to your emotions. Learn to listen to symptoms so that you don't need them anymore. A study done with tinnitus is ringing in the ears. A lot of people who are dealing with symptoms and health problems have that as well, and they've had really significant results with mindfulness, with cognitive behavioral therapy. Really good results. Something I've had, and I still get once in a while if I stress out too much and put too much pressure on myself, and if I were to try to make this presentation perfect for you and not mess up one bit and worry about if it's too long or if it's too short, or worry about if I'm going to have enough, all that stuff. That perfectionistic tendency. Sometimes I get it if I allow myself to go there. So these studies, you guys, they're all over the place, and I've just come with some of them. If you go to, there's this site here. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. You'll find archives of people who have actually taken this information and they're proving it. They're living proof. All these success stories of people who've had severe pain and worked through it and healed, and now have their quality of life is much, much better. There's testimonials from my brother's site, who's helped people heal from everything from lupus to knee pain to ankylosing spondylitis. There's the bibliography on TMS Wiki. You can go there and you can find even more studies that just connect in the mind and the body and show what's possible and flip the old paradigm over on its head. You know? There's success stories all over this too. You know, there's my page where I have testimonials of people who've decided to share. You know, I have to update it as well. And there's some people who don't want to share in video, but what you're seeing is that it's all over the place. Things are changing. And anything that's not linked in here, I'll link it on the other page when I post it, and below in the comments or something. So yeah, let's get back to full screen here. We're getting towards the end here, but there's a couple more articles. This one here you can find on Psychology Today, and it really goes through and describes psychosomatic, which is the same word as the same meaning as mind body. Psycho is, you know, dealing with the mind, somatic, the body. So it talks about them really well, and the illustrations are really, really beautiful too. You know, it's like the little pains that we feel in our body, our health problems. Like, what are they linked to? Oh, that's linked to an emotion that comes from an experience that maybe has been stored in your body for a while and needs to be felt, needs to be healed, needs to be released. The thing with this article is it doesn't really make the link between what it has been, you know, what we used to define a psychosomatic problem as in the past was way more limited, and now with all the research that's coming out, with all the things like the stuff that I've shown you, we're starting to realize that it's most things. That quote, psychosomatic disorders are physical symptoms that mask emotional distress. The very nature of the physical presentation of the symptom hides the distress at its root, so it is natural that those affected seek a medical disease to explain their suffering. They turn to medical doctors, not psychiatrists, to provide a diagnosis. And, you know, a psychiatrist sometimes can just, if they're not aware of how these things can get expressed in the body, they'll just keep it in the mind. But a holistic view in mind-body is really the most effective way to heal that I've found. It also gives you a way to work through it on your own with guidance, you know, with a program, with a facilitator, because it gives you some power back. You realize that there's no need to be afraid of health problems. You know, you learn how to work through challenges in your life and build more resilience. And you get to experience some things that it changes your reality to what you thought was possible. And you start to have experiences that make you realize, like, wow, we're capable of a lot. We can do so much. So take a moment, you know, ask yourself, how much more evidence do you need? How many more studies do you have to see? How many more testimonials will you say, oh, well, does it apply to this? And I have this that's a little different, and I don't know, I haven't seen a testimonial of somebody who has exactly what, you know. How much more evidence do you have to dig up? Who are you waiting for to tell you that you can heal? And so if I'm presenting you with this information, and, you know, these are some of the most widely accepted studies that have been done, And if there's still resistance, ask yourself where that's coming from. Is there a part of you that might want to remain the same? That is hesitant to give up the pain? No, we're more than just a bag of chemicals. Somebody can tell you what's happening in your brain when you feel love. Somebody can tell you the precise chemical compound of that beautiful tree that shades you on a hot summer's day where you can lie down and read a book underneath. But that's not going to tell you your experience of it. It's not going to tell you what it means to you to feel love or to feel what it's like to be so sheltered by nature. It's not what you know that heals you. It's not all the information that you find and dig up and all the studies. It's what you are. It's what you are that heals you. So you get to choose. We all get to choose. We all have free will. You can dig up all kinds of information. You can dig up information that conflicts with information here. You can dig up information that endorses the idea of you staying sick, of you not wanting to change. You can look up stories of people online that never healed and that are still stuck. You can choose to stay disempowered and discouraged. Or you can choose to give yourself permission to heal.